In our number 10 spot, we have the Vatican Library. The Vatican Library is a very secret library closed to the public. The only people that have access to it are popes and people that have gone through a lengthy screening process, and even then, they need to know exactly what they are wanting information on and will only be given info on what they ask for. This library is the top secret library with history and documentation since the beginning of time. The amount of dark gossip that is within those walls, I'm sure, is exponential. From the little that we know, the Vatican Library holds letters from world leaders throughout history detailing major events that us little guys will probably never be privy to. I'm sure they even have documentation on alien sightings. The church refuses to talk about what they have and know, and it's really just a shame. I'm a history lover myself, and truly that would be a magical experience to be able to explore this library. Ah well. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to be recommended more content like this. In our number 9 spot, we have Operation Snow White. On June 20th, 1977, Michael Meisner, a Scientologist, contacted the FBI after allegedly being held captive for months. He revealed that he was a part of the biggest infiltration of the US government in history, in something called Operation Snow White. On July 8th, 1977, 156 FBI agents entered a Scientology center in LA in the largest FBI raid in history. It was discovered that 5,000 Scientology agents infiltrated the IRS, the US Coast Guard Intelligence, DEA, etc. There were bugged offices, planted false information, stolen files, and so much more found. Apparently, the goal of this initiative was to remove any bad reports about Scientology. Some of the founders were sentenced to a few years in jail because of these crimes. They definitely want you to forget about this, but I'm sure they have done it again, and I'm sure other churches and organizations have done the same thing. We just haven't heard about it, and perhaps they haven't been caught. In our number 8 spot, we have exorcisms. This one shocked me. I knew that priests could do exorcisms, but I didn't realize that this is something that they do much. I truly thought that exorcisms were done more often in the movies to young girls doing the crab walk down the stairs. Yeesh, thinking of that scene gives me the shivers. Anyways, apparently the Vatican had a chief exorcist named Father Gabriel Amorth, who had served over 60 years to the church and had performed over 160,000 exorcisms. Excuse me? Wow. How have there been that many people infiltrated by demons and this info isn't more widely talked about? Also, that is just this guy's number. Apparently popes and priests around the world perform exorcisms all the time. I'm shooketh. I could understand that the church wouldn't want to talk about this because it is a private, very sad thing to happen to a person, but man, that's a lot of people walking around feeling like they have demons within them. Pretty scary. In our number 7 spot, we have His Holiness. His Holiness was a book that was released to the public in 2012, which is based on the secret leaked papers about Pope Benedict. Apparently, the private documents were leaked by the Pope's butler. Yikes. Apparently, after an investigation, it was discovered that the individuals who were not from the Vatican were blackmailing gay bishops because they had broken their celibacy vows. The Pope went on to resign after these documents became public. Well, this is definitely a scandal, that's for sure. I remember people talking about this when it was happening, but I don't remember hearing the church comment on it. But I guess they sort of did through their actions, and I'm sure Pope Benedict was encouraged to resign. In our number 6 spot, we have the dead man on trial. This is a little piece of history that truly terrifies me and is such a testament to those times. In 897 AD, a literal dead man was put on trial. The man had been dead for 7 months. He had been dressed for the occasion by someone whom I'm sure was traumatized afterward. His name was Pope Formosus. He was being put on trial for acts that he had committed in his life. He had a lawyer and everything. He was found guilty and stripped of his former title as Pope, and everything he formerly did was declared void. His body was stripped of his clothes and put into rags before he was thrown into a river, the Tiber River in Italy, specifically because this river was where a lot of criminals' bodies were disposed of. Pretty gross. I wonder if there are any ghost haunting stories from this river. I bet you there are. In our number 5 spot, we have the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank has had its fair share of scandals over the years, and you best believe that the church will not be bringing any attention to it by speaking about it in any way. Allegedly, to start off the scandals, it is said that the Vatican Bank received a church tax from Germany's leader during World War II, if you catch my drift. Also, allegedly, a large amount of money was paid to the IOR so that the Western banks couldn't track the Vatican's spending. The details have never been released to the public, so Lord knows where they put their money. But why would you want to hide your money in the first place? Perhaps so that no one would know what you're up to if you're up to no good, but also possibly because someone might be a threat and that might be a reason to shield what you're doing. Either way, the secrecy is questionable. In our number 4 spot, we have mental illness in the church. When researching for this video, one of the things that shocked me was the amount of people that spoke about how the churches do not handle mental illness very well. You would assume that it would be approached with love and compassion and guidance to get help. But the common theme is that people have been told to just pray and it will make the illness go away. Some believe that this thought process stems from the very old thinking that mental illness stems from demons being in one's body, and so people are being told to pray them away because that's what was always done if someone needed, an exorcism or to get rid of an attached spirit. The biggest problem is that issues go untalked about. The people bottle it up inside, and when prayer doesn't work, the person dealing with the mental illness feels like a failure or like they don't have enough faith. Hopefully this is something that churches of all religions work on improving, as this is just unacceptable at this point in time. In our number 3 spot, we have shame. Within many religions, there has been the problem of spiritual criticism, which has led to emotional harm within the church communities. I'm not talking about outsiders passing judgment, I'm talking about religious community members passing judgments on each other. This bad behavior is committed under the banner of spirituality. From practices of shaming members if they don't fulfill religious expectations, to bad-mouthing members who have left, making people want to stay out of fear. Scientologists have been accused of doing that to members that have tried to leave, but also other churches have been accused of this as well. It's super unfortunate to hear that in communities that have, the core purpose of being loving, they are people that are shaming each other. Talk about not practicing what you preach. In our number 2 spot, we have misusing their power. In recent years, it has become public knowledge that the French clergy took advantage of more than 200,000 individuals since the 1950s, mainly males. The Catholic Church has been accused of turning a blind eye to this happening, and many have been outraged that this went on for so long without someone stepping in. Allegedly, it wasn't until the 2000s that some progress was made. Before that, the church showed complete indifference to the victims. Through a series of investigations, 2,700 victims gave testimonies about what happened to them, and thousands were identified through archives. A wide-range study showed that there could be up to 330,000 victims. In recent years, about 2,900 to 3,200 priests have become suspects to these crimes. Wow. Truly despicable. I hope that there is some kind of justice for these victims. In our number 1 spot, we have the Salem witch trials. Most people believe that the witch trials were a result of many things: bad weather, a poor government, and paranoid leaders. But what a lot of people may not be aware of is the idea that the Catholic and Protestant churches possibly used the trials to compete with each other for followers. Pretty dark. History.com reported that economists Peter Leeson and Jacob Russ believe that, quote, the two churches advertised their finesse at persecuting witches as proof that they were the best church to join if you wanted protection from Satan. Witches, after all, were doing the bidding of Satan, so getting rid of them was a way to protect people from them. Wow. Well, that will definitely persuade 1 or 2 people, that's for sure. It has also been noted that the Catholic Church did not fear or acknowledge witches in history until the Protestant Church became a competitor threat.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the kingdom. This passage is one that comes from Matthew 7:21-23, and it reads, "Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of thy Father who is in heaven. On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Some people feel as though this passage is suggesting that there are people out there who believe themselves to be Christians, and people who are thinking that they are going to go to heaven or paradise when they die, but in reality, they don't know God at all, and he sees things very differently than they do. Definitely drives home the fact that not all good work lands people a spot in heaven. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Judgment of Solomon. When two women approached King Solomon with a question, no one had any idea of what horrors were about to ensue. The women wanted to know which one of them was the mother of the baby, and the king had quite an interesting solution. 1 Kings 3:24 reads, "And the king said, 'Bring me a sword.' And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, 'Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other.'" Yeah, the king suggested that they just cut the baby in half and split it. I mean, why didn't they think of that? Don't worry, no babies were harmed in this particular instance, as the true mother of the child was revealed when she sacrificed her life with the baby in order to save its life, while the other woman was on board with the whole slicing it in half thing. The passage finishes off by reading, "The king gave his decision. Give the living baby to the first woman. No one is going to kill this baby. She is the real mother." The word got around, everyone in Israel's heard of the king's judgment. They were all in awe of the king, realizing that it was God's wisdom that enabled him to judge truly. In our number 8 spot today, we have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. This story starts off when angels begin trying to visit Lot, who is a very devout and pious man. Things quickly go awry, however, as before they can enter his house, they are attacked by an angry mob from Sodom. Lot tries to save the angels, and to do this, he offers up his own daughters to the mob. I mean, like I mentioned, he's very devout, so I'm sure he means well, but if I was one of those daughters, I would have been pissed. Thankfully, the angels end up finding a different alternative. They instead blind the mob, and the daughters are spared. The angels then lead Lot and co. away from the burning city. As they leave, however, Lot's wife looks back on her burning home just to get like one last glimpse. Can we really blame her? Well, apparently someone can, because when she looks back, she is immediately turned into a pillar of salt due to her apparent lack of faith. If you can believe this, that isn't even the craziest part of the story. But the next part is not written for YouTube guidelines, so there's not much of it that I can repeat. Let's just say that Lot and his daughters find a cave to hide out in, and they decide to continue on the lineage. I'm not really sure what the lesson in this one is, to be honest. Don't look back as you're fleeing your home. Offer up your own daughter for sacrifice. I don't know, man. In our number 7 spot today, we have Gabriel. So in many of the texts, angels are like the messengers of God, but they also have their own powers and abilities that they can use as they see fit. In one particular story, Archangel Gabriel is sent to announce the birth of John the Baptist to Zechariah, but when Gabriel does this, he gets a less than enthusiastic response from Zechariah. In fact, this response was one of protest, and Gabriel did not like that. He said, "I am Gabriel, I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you do not believe my words, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occur." Yeah, the guy didn't like being dismissed, so he just took away his ability to speak for a bit to teach him a lesson. I guess the lesson here is to listen to an angel if it appears to you and tells you that you're gonna have a kid? I'm not sure. At the end of the day, it's a bit of a dark way to deliver the good news. He's like, do you want the good news first or the bad news? In our number 6 spot today, we have John the Baptist. This tale starts off when King Herod had John the Baptist imprisoned after he spoke out against the king for divorcing and then remarrying his own brother's wife. While in jail, the king was throwing a huge party, and part of the entertainment was when the king's new stepdaughter was dancing for all the men. The king became completely enthralled with her. I know, I'm creeped out too, but he is so obsessed that he offers her anything that she wants. She has quite an unexpected answer, however, as her response is that she wants John the Baptist's head brought to her on a platter. The king doesn't really want to do this, but he also promised her anything she wished, and this was what she wanted. Thus, the beheading of John the Baptist took place, and she was served his head on a platter in front of the whole party. Imagine you're just like enjoying a nice charcuterie plate, some wine, enjoying the party, and then someone brings out a head on a platter. Yeah, terrible party, appetite fully ruined. John the Baptist, although he met a cruel fate, would later go on to be sainted. In our number 5 spot today we have King Herod's fate. Back with another King Herod story, this time he is meeting his own fate, and man, it is truly not ideal. Basically, he shows up, he's doing some public speaking, and in doing so he is challenged. Despite this challenge, he still refuses to acknowledge God as the one true God. If we know anything about that in the Bible, it usually does not end well for those who don't acknowledge this. This leads to Herod immediately being struck down by God. I mean, he wasn't just gonna stand for that, especially in front of a bunch of his followers, but that isn't just the average striking down. He didn't just die right there on the spot. Oh no, his fate had to be much worse than instant death. Instead, he likely wished that were the case, as he met his fate by slowly being eaten alive by worms from the inside out. Slow, agonizing, completely dreadful. This story truly is not for the faint of heart, but it serves as a great reminder for those who believe in the stories of the Bible. In our number 4 spot today we have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These 4 entities are described as part of the prophecy by John in the book of Revelations. Many people take their story to mean that these horsemen are those who will bring the apocalypse, and that they are the harbingers of the last judgment. It is said that pestilence or plague will ride in on a white horse, war on a red horse, and famine on a black horse, and death on a pale horse. The story in the Bible speaks of how a quarter of the Earth's population will be killed by a combination of all of the horsemen. All in all, while these horsemen definitely have creepy descriptions, nothing is as creepy as the thought of them bringing the apocalypse with them. In our number 3 spot today we have Joram and the Mothers. For this one, I'll start with the passage and we can dive into what it all really means after. So 2 Kings 6:28-29 reads, "And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him, and she hath hid her son." If you didn't quite catch that, this passage tells the story of 2 starving women who agree to their own children in order to survive. Once they eat the first woman's child, the second woman doesn't hold up her end of the deal and instead hides her son to protect him. The story is clearly very gruesome and horrible, but many people believe its desperation and deceit shows not only the king but also the reader the severity of what people are going through when they are enduring an enemy siege. In our number 2 spot today we have Raphael. Raphael is one of the true archangels, and he is the 4th oldest of the 5. He is a powerful healer, a guardian angel, and a great fighter, but there is just one unsettling story in particular that I really want to talk about, and that story comes from the book of Enoch. In this story, Raphael is in a battle with the demon Azazel. Raphael is able to defeat the demon, but decides to subject him to a fate worse than death. The story writes, "Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Duodel, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire." If that wasn't clear enough, Raphael tied this demon up, buried him alive in a hole full of rocks in the middle of the desert, where he now just gets to wait until he can be thrown into a fire and burned alive. I gotta say, that is very dark, but it has become abundantly clear: do not mess with an angel, okay? In our number 1 spot today we have the nephews. Moses had 2 nephews named Nadab and Abihu, and their father Aaron was quite important to the priest community, and he was the only one who was meant to make sacrifices to God. These 2, however, decided that they too should be good enough to burn an offering, but things did not go to plan for them. You know, no one can start feeling too good about themselves without some kind of consequence. We don't want anyone getting too big of an ego around here. When this happened, God decided to send a huge fire from heaven that completely engulfed both of the men and just fried them to ash on the spot. Right where they stood, they ended up completely charred, and everyone learned a very valuable lesson that day, it seems. Starting off in our number 10 spot we have exorcisms. So one would think that exorcisms would be strictly reserved for horror movies and the like, but that is simply not true. They are definitely a real-life nightmare, and the former chief exorcist of the Vatican certainly knows all about them. The late priest, Father Gabriel Amorth, served in this position for more than 60 years, and throughout his career he is said to have performed approximately 160,000 exorcisms. That's an insane number. What's even more concerning is it's not like he's the only one doing them. There are tons of priests who perform these things. So much so that there's a workshop at the Vatican that has welcomed 250 priests from across the world to learn how to perform such a thing. This is all to say that a lot more exorcisms are happening than I would have liked to think. In our number 9 spot today, we have the man on trial. Okay, history is full of a lot of weird stuff, especially when it comes to laws and court and all of that stuff. Things were really different back then, and this is an example of just how different. In 897 AD, the Catholic Church put a dead man on trial. People have definitely been held accountable after death in our modern society. A posthumous trial can be held for a variety of reasons, but that's not what happened here. No, they actually exhumed the body of this man after he had been dead for 7 months already, and they literally brought his body to the courtroom. Necessary? Probably not. Dramatic? Most certainly. I thought jury duty now was bad. Imagine being the jury for that trial. This man on trial was Pope Formosus, and he was being accused of usurping the papacy. In the end, he was found guilty of this. All of his acts as pope were declared null and void. His body was then stripped of all official garments and instead dressed in rags. His 3 fingers of benediction were cut off and his body was thrown into the river. They very obviously took this all very seriously. In our number 8 spot today, we have Wine Wednesday. Okay, this one might not be terrifying, but I guess that depends on how you feel about wine. According to reports, it is said that the wine consumption in the Vatican is greater than any other country. Like, statistically, the average person living in the Vatican consumes 20 gallons of wine every year. It's a lot of wine. That's 3 times the average of someone in the UK, 6 times as much as someone in the US, and twice as much as the typical resident of France and Italy. If only there wasn't so much other creepy stuff going on in the Vatican, it might actually be a good time. In our number 7 spot today, we have the crime rate. The Vatican is the smallest state in the world in terms of both area size and population size. Despite this fact, however, it still manages to have one of the highest crime rates in the entire world. Not what you would think for the Holy State, right? The crime rate in the Vatican is said to be 20 times higher than the crime rate in Italy. It's said that there is 1.5 crimes per person. It is said that this is due to the high number of tourists, which makes the area a pickpocket's dream. But who's to say for sure if that's the case? Either way, best to keep your eyes and ears peeled if you're ever walking through those streets, apparently. In our number 6 spot today, we have the digital world. Okay, definitely less terrifying and more just bizarre, or I guess surprising is probably the right way to put it. During his time in the position, Pope Benedict XVI liked to send text messages to his subscribers around the world. Surprisingly, in 2009, the Vatican even opened up a YouTube channel to show different papal addresses and ceremonies. To take this all even a step further, the Vatican even had an app for smartphones. Imagine being the person who created it. The app contained multiple different versions in different languages of a prayer book and the prayers of daily mass. Just months before his resignation, Pope Benedict XVI even got a Twitter account. So, the papacy is going digital, apparently. In our number 5 spot today, we have the secret archives. The secret archives of the Vatican are one of the best known things about the entire state, but what exactly is in them remains much of a mystery. The archives are 53 miles long and there are thousands and thousands of catalogs. Only scholars can access these catalogs, but it still takes quite a bit of time and effort to get a pass to see them. Also, once you're there, you have to request what you want. There's no browsing the archives allowed. The official purpose of these archives is to house important paperwork and things pertaining to the Pope, but many people have speculated about all the secrets that these archives could be holding. Considering how many things and stories most of us have heard about what secrets may be hiding in the Vatican, one can only guess what atrocities may lurk in some of the pages found in these archives. In our number 4 spot today, we have the bank. The Institute for Works of Religion, also known as the Vatican Bank, is certainly no stranger to scandal, as it has definitely seen its fair share over the years. This bank was first established during World War II, during a time that Italy was fighting against the Allied forces. Out of all of the controversies throughout the years, the bank and their dealings with the guy who we'll call Adolf Hitler, for the sake of this video, is by far the most controversial. It has been reported that the Vatican received a considerable church tax from the evil single guy annually. A lot of this money was paid this way so that it couldn't be tracked by Western banks, and this is kind of how the IOR became known as the world's top offshore bank. The Catholic Church has, of course, made use of the IOR to store tons and tons of its money, the extent of which has never been revealed to the public, so we will likely never know exactly what went on with all of these shady World War II dealings. In our number 3 spot today, we have family ties. This is something that really came to light in 1982. In that year, the Vatican Bank president resigned from the role after a series of scandals that ended up exposing the bank's ties to the mafia. In the end, the bank had to repay more than $200 million to its creditors because of this entire scandal. The bank president was never indicted on any of these crimes, but he has been suspected of not only these crimes, but also being involved in several mysterious deaths. Like, what in the world? This is so wild. In the end, he had diplomatic immunity in the United States, and he retired in Arizona in the 1990s, where he lived out the rest of his life. In our number 2 spot today, we have tax evasion. So there's a rule where the Vatican enjoys a property tax break for all non-commercial properties that contain a chapel. It's a pretty sweet deal, and they apparently decided to try and kind of take advantage of that a little bit. Between the years 2001 and 2006, the Vatican allegedly kind of evaded taxes that amounted to a cool 4 billion euros. The European Court of Justice, of course, ruled this entire thing illegal, and that is why the Vatican had to later procure 4 billion euros as post-dated tax. Many people speculate that this is just a drop in the bucket of what they owe in evaded taxes, but I don't even know how to do my own taxes, so who am I to say? In our number 1 spot today, we have the secret court. This one isn't so much a secret anymore, but it was up until 2009. The Vatican has a secret court for sins that are based on conscience. The bishops who handle these hearings are known as the Tribunal of Conscience, and this whole idea was created by Pope Alexander in 1179, and like I mentioned, was kept a secret from the public until 2009. The sins that this court sees range from the spitting out of a communion wafer all the way to things like priests breaking their vow of celibacy, and I'm sure a lot more stuff that we just won't even get into. You know, fun stuff. The tribunal, of course, considers these matters, but the decision-making in the end lies with the major penitentiary.
And we're starting off with this photograph of the types of cells that were used to house supposed witches during the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were a very dark and infamous chapter in American history that unfolded in the late 17th century. Taking place in Salem, Massachusetts, the trials were fueled by a climate of fear, superstition, and religious fervor. Accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire, just tearing apart families and communities. It all began when a group of young girls claimed to be afflicted by strange ailments and started pointing fingers at certain individuals as the source of their suffering, all of which were kind of outcasts in the community. And these accusations quickly snowballed. It led to mass hysteria and just a frenzy of trials. The accused were subjected to flawed and biased legal proceedings. Evidence and confessions were obtained under duress and were deemed admissible, and 19 innocent people were ultimately convicted and put to death. Historical documents and illustrations related to the Salem witch trials were often concealed by authorities seeking to downplay the events and distance themselves from the mass hysteria that was going on at the time. At number 9, we have Pope Pius XII's secret wartime documents. These documents, which were previously hidden within the Vatican's secret archives, were released in 2020, and they reveal some pretty intriguing stuff about the Vatican during World War II and the Pope's relationship with the leader of the Third Reich. These documents, spanning loads of pages, give us a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of Pope Pius's actions during one of the darkest times in history. People were hoping for some concrete answers about the Pope's stance during this time, but it turns out it's a bit of a mixed bag. Apparently there's no definitive evidence in these documents that he actively denounced the actions of the Third Reich, or was at least doing enough to try and help the people. And as it turns out, he even had contact with Mr. H himself. There is also some evidence, of course, he was working behind the scenes to try and aid in the war effort, but historians and scholars are having just a field day with this treasure trove of information, trying to uncover the truth about the Vatican's role in those tumultuous times. At number 8, we have Anneliese Michel. Most of you have probably seen this image before. It's incredibly harrowing, really sticks with you. No amount of horror movie makeup can replicate just how disturbing the image of this poor woman is. The case of Anneliese is a haunting and very tragic tale that unfolded in the 1970s. Anneliese, a young German woman, experienced a series of alarming physical and psychological symptoms that were eventually attributed to demonic possession. Convinced that she was possessed by demons, Anneliese and her family sought help from both medical professionals and the Catholic Church. Unfortunately, her pleas for assistance were met with a blend of misguided religious fervor and a lack of appropriate medical intervention. Anneliese's condition just deteriorated rapidly, and she endured months of grueling exorcism rituals performed by 2 priests. The sessions were physically and mentally tortuous, with Anneliese being subjected to restraints, being denied food, and enduring countless hours of psychological torment. Although there are also stories about her even outright denying food herself, so there was definitely stuff going on here within her brain that just wasn't being properly diagnosed. Throughout this chain of sad events, Anneliese's health worsened. She became emaciated and weakened. The tragedy lies not only in this immense suffering Anneliese endured, but also in the lack of proper intervention. The case raised important questions about the kind of intersection of religion and mental health. It really highlights the danger of neglecting evidence-based medical treatment in favor of superstition. At number 7 on the list, we have a bit of a different one. These are documents and possible images that have been successfully hidden in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly called the Vatican Secret Archive, which I like way better. I love the word secret is actually in the title. I didn't just add it for dramatic effect. We don't just hold archives here. These are secret archives. Anyway, this vast repository located within the walls of Vatican City houses an extensive collection of historical documents spanning centuries. While the term secret may imply sinister activities, the archive's purpose, as it's said, is primarily to preserve and protect sensitive or confidential material related to the Catholic Church. But there's definitely an allure about the unknown, and it's fueled various theories about the existence of possibly dark secrets concealed within those walls. Some speculate that the archive may contain controversial documents related to the church's historical controversies, like the Inquisition, the Crusades, and, as discussed earlier, some stuff about the role of the church during World War II, which came out fairly recently. Others propose that it holds hidden knowledge about the existence of maybe extraterrestrial life or ancient relics that challenge the established religious narratives, but hey, who knows? Next on the list, we have St. Joseph's Orphanage in Vermont. So we have a number of images from inside the walls of this notorious orphanage. They do have a certain old photograph creepiness about them, but for the most part, they're pretty innocuous, but it's the context behind these seemingly innocent photographs that makes them so uncomfortable to look at. Behind the doors of this orphanage were countless instances of mistreatment. Mistreatment is really putting it lightly. It was outright horrific what went on here, and when over 100 former residents of the orphanage came forward to make statements about how they had suffered as children in the facility, no charges were made, and the church had turned a blind eye to the cruelty the residents experienced at the hands of the nuns who ran it. The list of crimes committed are just too long to list, but it's so bad that there were actually children who lost their lives at this place, and not by accident. Some were pushed off boats. There's other stories about instances of being pushed out windows by nuns. It's infuriating hearing what went on here. This next image was an engraving by Bernard Picart, a draftsman, illustrator, and engraver from the early 18th century. This image here is his depiction of a torture chamber of the Spanish Inquisition. We see supposed heretics being suspended by ropes. One man has his feet being held to a fire. Picart created a body of work that challenged the religious norms of his time. His art often depicted religious subjects in unconventional ways that questioned the dogma upheld by the Catholic Church at the time. Picart's approach was met with disapproval a lot of the time and condemnation from the Church, who considered his interpretations as blasphemous or heretical. But his willingness to depict religious figures and stories in a critical light led to his work being looked down upon and criticized by the Church. Up next, we have this image. This is Dennis Rader, someone who upstanding members of the Christian faith would not be proud to learn that he is indeed a believer. Dennis Rader was a notorious American serial killer who terrorized the community of Wichita, Kansas from 1974 to 1991. What made Rader's case particularly chilling was the stark contrast between his heinous crimes and his seemingly normal everyday life. At the time of his arrest in 2005, it was revealed that Rader had served as a church leader, contributing to his image as this upstanding member of society. He was an active member of the Lutheran Church, holding positions such as president of the church council and leader of the Boy Scouts. Rader's role as a church leader and this image he upheld as being this dedicated member of his community only made it more of a shock when he was found out about his crimes. This guy, just an absolute monster. He did some incredibly twisted things that I just can't go into detail here, but just a reminder that no matter how decent people seem on the outside, there could be something much darker going on behind closed doors. Not trying to say you shouldn't trust anybody, just, keep your eyes peeled. Don't be too trusting. At number 3, we have the Salem UFO sighting. This photo may not look all that spectacular compared to some of the actual footage we've seen of possible UFOs today, but just keep in mind that this photo was taken in 1952. It wasn't doctored, and these mysterious glowing lights in the sky have never been explained. The photo was snapped by Coast Guard Officer Shell Alpert in Salem, Massachusetts. What makes this image really stand out is just how clear it is. It's not blurry, it's very obvious that there are 4 glowing discs hovering in the air. Now, in terms of why the church would have tried to hide an image like this, maybe people starting to believe in the presence of extraterrestrial life would have gone against what the Bible laid out. Really, I just put this one on here because it's an intriguing photograph. Number 2, let's change gears for a minute and take a look at a fairly recent image that made headlines when it was first shared on social media back in 2017. It didn't make headlines on major publications or anything, but it was all over the internet at the time. This image looks to be some sort of large winged thing. The picture was taken in Phoenix, Arizona by Richard Christensen, who's just as confused as everyone else as to what he captured on camera. Some said it resembled Mothman, but others said that this shadowy figure resembled an angel or even possibly a demon. Definitely looks more like a harbinger of doom to me. Of course, it could just be a trick of the camera or just an outright hoax, but I think it's a pretty eerie looking photo. And coming in at number 1 is William Tyndale. This image depicts the termination of William Tyndale, who was burned at the stake for doing what, you might ask? Turns out is translating the Bible into English. As it turns out, what the Catholic Church was trying to hide here was actually the Bible itself. At least they wanted to keep it out of the hands of everyday people, anyway, which they believed would undermine their power. Tyndale believed that the Bible should be accessible to the common people in their own language, challenging the church's monopoly on biblical interpretation. His translation work, particularly the New Testament, faced opposition from religious authorities who sought to maintain control over religious teachings. The church considered Tyndale's translation as heretical, as it was in direct opposition to their authority, and his efforts were met with resistance, and he was ultimately arrested in 1535. In 1536, he was sentenced for heresy. He was sentenced and condemned to death by strangulation before being burned at the stake.
Number 10. SS Watertown. In December 1924, James Courtney and Michael Meehan were crew members on the SS Watertown. They were cleaning a cargo tank of the oil tanker, and they were overcome by gas fumes, which resulted in both of their deaths. Due to this, the crew buried them at sea, but to their astonishment, the ghostly faces of the soldiers appeared in the water the next day. Yeah, like in the waves. Later on, many other crew members reported seeing the faces as well. The faces were so visible that the captain of the ship ordered them to take a picture of them to have for proof, so people didn't think that they were crazy. And this was smart, because if someone told me they saw faces of two dead men in the water, I would probably never talk to them again and think that they were cuckoo. Although, in the picture, you can clearly see two faces, which is just plain creepy. When the SS Watertown returned to land, the negative was even checked for fakery and proclaimed genuine. So yeah, just two faces chilling in the waves. No big deal. Number 9. The Nurse. This photo was taken in an abandoned tuberculosis hospital in Louisville, Kentucky called Waverly Hills Sanatorium in 2006. As you can imagine, many people passed away here, and it's rumored to be filled with paranormal activity. In recent years, it has become one of America's most popular destinations for ghost hunters. This image depicts a woman just standing to the right side, but when the photo was taken, no one was there. It was a ghost. It has been agreed among the paranormal community that the photo depicts Mary Lee, a nurse who took her own life in the hospital. The story goes, this poor woman was impregnated by a doctor who worked in the hospital, but later wanted nothing to do with her. Nowadays, she wanders the halls of the hospital and interacts with ghost hunters. Number 8. Tulip Staircase. Reverend Ralph Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, took this famous photograph in 1966. Originally, he only wanted to take a picture of the elegant tulip staircase in the Queen's House section of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. And I mean, I don't blame him. They're pretty. But upon development, the photo revealed a shrouded figure climbing the stairs. It's strange and unsettling, and Ralph said there was no one else in the frame when he took it. Experts who examined the original negative concluded that it had not been tampered with. The vicinity of the staircase is rumored to be haunted, and unexplained footsteps have often been heard there, so it's most likely something supernatural who just wanted their photo taken. Number 7. The Brown Lady. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is a ghost that reportedly haunts Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England. It became one of the most famous hauntings in the United Kingdom when photographers from Country Life magazine claimed to have captured its image. According to the legend, the Brown Lady is the ghost of Dorothy Walpole, the sister of Robert Walpole, generally regarded as the first Prime Minister of Great Britain. She was the second wife of Charles Townshend, 2nd Viscount Townshend, who was notorious for his violent temper. The story goes that when Charles discovered that his wife had committed adultery with Lord Wharton, he punished her by locking her in her rooms in the family home, Raynham Hall. According to Mary Wortley Montagu, Dorothy was in fact entrapped by the Countess of Wharton. She invited Dorothy over to stay for a few days, knowing that her husband would never allow her to leave, not even to see her children. She remained at the Raynham Hall until her death in 1726 from smallpox. This is just an extremely sad story, and I can't imagine her pain. The first sighting of the Brown Lady was in 1835, and the photograph was taken in 1936. Number 6. Falling through the ceiling. Back in the 1950s, the Cooper family from Texas moved into their new house. Once there, they took a family photo, which seems normal, right? Well, not for them. When the picture was developed, the image of a body falling from the ceiling was clearly visible. To be clear, no one fell from the ceiling when they took the photo, so what happened? As further investigation on the story has brought no plausible explanation, there exist many speculations, including one that argues that the shadow is the ghost of the previous owner of the house. But my question is, why is he falling from the ceiling, and why did he have to ruin that beautiful family photo? I remember seeing this photo on the internet when I was probably too young to see it, and after all these years, this image still gives me chills. Ugh. Number 5.
backseat ghost. On March 22nd, 1959, Mabel Chinnery and her husband drove to the graveyard in which her mother had been buried. Her mother had died a week previously, and they were going to take photos of her grave, and they did. As Mabel returned to the car, she decided to use her last remaining shot to take a candid picture of her husband waiting in the vehicle on the passenger side. Nothing was out of the ordinary, it was just a random photo, but when the pictures were developed, one of Mabel's friends pointed out that someone, believed to be her mother, appeared to be behind her husband in the back seat of the car. Now, was the figure her mother or some other spirit? Who knows? I mean, they were in a graveyard, it could have been anyone or anything. The photograph itself wasn't seen in the United States until the story got a whole page in the Sunday newspaper. Mabel stated that the spot where the unexpected figure appeared in the back of the car is where her mother always sat when they went for drives, so it makes sense that it could be her. An unnamed photo expert is quoted as saying, "The lady in the back can't be the result of a double exposure. If it were, the door's upright wouldn't block off part of her face, and she can't be a reflection in the window either." So maybe it really is Mabel's mother. Number 4. Wem Ghost. On November 19th, 1995, Wem Town Hall burned to the ground in Wem, Shropshire, located in England. During the fire, Tony O'Rahilly, a sewage farm worker who was also an amateur photographer, was originally stopped by police from approaching the burning building. He took a picture of the blaze from across the street with a 200mm lens. It appeared to depict the image of a young girl in the doorway of the burning building. Now, to be clear, there were no injuries or fatalities from the fire. This was not a human. Locals who saw the photo believed it was the ghost of Jane Churm, a young girl who was accused in 1677 of starting a fire in the same town. The image of the girl in the doorway of the burning building was not noticed by Tony, the photographer, or the onlookers. It only appeared after the photo had been developed. I mean, if she was accused of starting a fire and then she popped back up in an area where another fire started, it seems like it really could be Jane. Number 3. The Spectre of Newby Church. The Spectre of Newby Church is the name given to a figure in the photograph taken in the Church of Christ the Consoler on the grounds of Newby Hall in North Yorkshire, United Kingdom. The image was taken in 1963 by the Reverend Kenneth F. Lord. As the figure appears to resemble a human, much speculation has been had regarding what type of person might be in the image. Most speculation by believers has concluded that it resembles a 16th century monk with a white shroud over his face, possibly to mask leprosy or another disfigurement. Others believe it looks like a plague doctor from the 16th and 17th centuries. Initial claims suggest that the figure would measure at 9 feet tall, but its feet are not visible, so it could easily be standing on a box, giving the impression of height. Some people thought the photo was due to double exposure, but photographic experts have concluded that the image is not the result of double exposure. So what was it, and why was it in a church? No one truly knows, but it's extremely frightening. What does it look like to you? Let me know in the comments. Number 2. Mystery Guest. On January 22nd, 1985, the Coventry Freeman organization and their guests stood in prayer during a dinner event. All the guests are still, and as it was a dark room, the photographer probably thought it would be the perfect time to allow for a longer than usual exposure to get enough light into the picture. Makes sense. Now, nothing was out of the ordinary at the time, but as people started to see the print of the picture, a mystery surfaced. Who was the robed figure standing near the end of one of the tables? No one had dressed up for the event, and no one remembers anyone standing there as they stood for prayer. The figure also seems to be taking part in the prayer, head slightly bowed, hands clasped in front. St. Mary's Coventry, Warwickshire is where the event was hosted. It has many legends of ghosts and paranormal activity, but I wonder why this being decided to join in prayer. It just gives me bad vibes, like evil lurks within it. And coming in at number 1 is the Young Boy. One of the most famous haunted houses in the United States is the Dutch Colonial House at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The haunting stems from the night of November 13th, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald Defoe ended the lives of all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald committed his crimes. Kathy said she would feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it. All of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying in the house for 28 days, and honestly, I don't blame them. Due to this, demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras and caught this photo. The picture wasn't made public until 3 years later when George Lutz appeared on the Merv Griffith Show in 1979. Believers of the haunting think that the picture is the ghost of the youngest Defoe son, John Matthew, who was 9 at the time. Others believed it's a staged photo, but despite its controversy, this picture is one of the most frightening images from the Amityville horror.
We're starting things off with the Guildhall ghost. This photograph was taken in 1985, which is kind of surprising. It looks like something taken in 1925. What we're looking at here are members of the Coventry Freeman organization at St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, UK. They're bowing their heads in prayer. They're at a dinner service. In the top left-hand corner, though, we see a figure that seems to be wearing a long robe of some kind. They're not dressed like anyone else there. We're all mostly in suits and ties. Now, what makes this photo so creepy is that apparently nobody had seen this robed figure before until the film was developed and they looked at the image. Lord Mayor Walter Brandish, who was at the dinner, claimed there was no one in that spot at the time and nobody who had been dressed like that at the entire event. You can also see that whoever or whatever this figure is, it's pretty tall, a head or two taller than most of the people in the photo. Only thing scarier than a ghost is a really tall ghost. Number 9, the devil portrait. This is a photo taken of an infamous image of the devil depicted in one of the most supposedly cursed books in history, the Codex Gigas, aka the Devil's Bible. Yeah, the Devil's Bible. Wonder why the church wouldn't want this book getting around. It's believed to have been written between 1204 and 1230, year-wise, not time of day, and changed hands several times before being housed in Sweden's National Library in 1768, where it still sits today. The book contains the Old and New Testament, as well as a plethora of other information of the time, but it's the magic spells that place the book in that cursed category, as well as the image of the devil, of course. And legend has it that this is not just any mere depiction of Satan. There's a dark tale behind it. It's said that the Codex Gigas was written by a monk who had broken his vows in some way and was being sentenced to death. There are many versions of the tale, but the point is he attempted to cut a deal. If he could write a book containing all the world's knowledge in a single night, his life would be spared. This is of course an incredibly unfair and impossible task, unless you have some sort of deity helping you, right? And said monk was tempted by the devil himself and ended up selling his soul to him in order to help complete the book. And this demonic portrait is actually said to be Satan's own doing, his very signature, which he signed at the end. It's also, in some versions, the monk drew it as a tribute to him as well. Number 8, the White Lady of Worstead Church. Taken in August of 1975 by Peter Berthelot, who is visiting the Church of St. Mary's in North Norfolk with his family. It shows his wife Diane sitting on a church bench, head bowed as she prays. Now, Peter claimed that there was nobody sitting behind his wife when he snapped the picture, but once they were showing their pictures in a slideshow several months later with some friends, one of them chimed in asking, "Diane, who's that sitting behind you?" They looked closer at the photo and were like, "Yeah, who is that?" Diane was quoted saying, "When we saw the white figure sitting behind me on the projector screen, we just stood there with our mouths open." Looking closely at the ghostly figure, it almost looks like a woman wearing a bonnet. Peter and Diane took the photo back to the church, where the vicar told them the story of the White Lady, the ghost of a woman who appears to those who need healing. And apparently at the time the picture was taken, Diane was having some health issues and was on antibiotics. Next up, we have the Sefton Church Ghost. In Maryside, England, just north of Liverpool, stands the Sefton Church, which finished construction in the 16th century. This image here was taken in 1999, and you can clearly see what looks to be a priest standing there. It's a cool photo, but looking at it without context, you wouldn't really think there's anything supernatural about it, if it weren't for the fact that the photographer, Brad Steiger, said that there was only one other person with him in the church at the time, another photographer who was standing right beside him. So who is the person or specter in this picture? Could it be the spirit of a former priest that still lingers within the walls of the church, or is it the same ghost that apparently haunts a pub next door called the Punch Bowl? Maybe it's both. I looked it up on Google Maps. The Punch Bowl is still there, literally right next door. It's an old-timey looking pub. It could be haunted for sure. At number 6, we have the hospital demon. This next image is incredibly mysterious, as there's not a lot of information on it. All we really know, or at least have been told, is that the image was supposedly snapped by a nurse at an unknown hospital in an unknown state. It was taken on a security camera and shows a patient lying in bed, and crouching on top of them is what looks to be some sort of demonic entity. It looks very much like your archetypal devil. You can see what looks like horns on its head. Its legs almost look goat-like with hooves. It's very creepy, even if it is a total hoax. Again, there's not much information on this image, but apparently the entity appeared briefly, and just a few hours after it showed up, the patient died. Is this the image of a genuine demonic entity waiting for the patient to pass before dragging them to hell? Is it just a hoax? Let us know your thoughts in the comments once again. And we're going back to the realm of cursed books now with the Grand Grimoire. This image here is one of the many illustrations associated with the Grand Grimoire. It's a textbook of sorts containing all sorts of black magic spells, believed to have been written in 1702. The book gives a detailed description on how to summon a specific demon and the tools used in order to make it do your bidding. It also contains various spells used for winning the lottery, communicating with the dead, making yourself invisible, etc. I don't know. I gotta get my hands on this book. The book was readily available and became quite popular in France in the 19th century, and the church set out to vilify it, claiming this book and others like it to be sinister and dangerous, and their campaign was pretty successful. The book kind of died in popularity because, you know, people don't want demons in their houses, I guess. Don't know why. At the number 4 spot, we have the ghost of Saint Botolph's. Now, to the untrained eye, this image looks pretty innocuous, right? Just looks like a church. But take a close look at the top right-hand corner. We'll zoom in for you. Yeah, it seems to be a ghostly figure standing by the balcony. The photo was taken in 1982 by a man named Chris Brackley. Apparently, he hadn't seen anyone standing by the balcony when the photo was snapped. It wasn't until he developed the picture that this strange entity showed up. The picture was analyzed extensively, and it was determined that it wasn't the result of double exposure. Chris's equipment seemed to be operating fine too. A few years after the picture was taken, Chris was contacted by a builder who had done restoration work on a crypt at the church, and apparently the builder had knocked down a wall and accidentally disturbed a coffin. Inside of it was a woman whose face was eerily similar to the one captured in Chris's picture. This next image was posted to Reddit by Reddit user u/luciddream a few years back with the caption, "Real ghost or demon on the reflection of one of my friend's photos." Now, this is an image that would be really easy to fake, of course, but all the same, I hate this. This is a freaky picture, and it makes me uncomfortable. It's hard to make out exactly what we're looking at here, but it's a picture taken of a mirror, and you can see the reflection of a woman lying on the bed, and behind her is, yeah, I don't know what. I hope it's a dog, but it looks more like some sort of ghostly or demonic entity with a mane of messy black hair, very Grudge-esque. It's just your perfect example of a cursed image. There's just something off about it. I don't have a whole lot to say about this one, as there's not a lot of info on it, but it's eerie. It's eerie. And at number 2, we have the cave demon. There aren't a whole lot of supposedly real photos of demons out there, but this one has been floating around the internet since the late 90s. According to the legend, 2 boys from England had been exploring a cave in the United Arab Emirates. At one point, they heard a man scream. It was too dark for the boys to make out anything, so they pulled out their camera and snapped a picture with the flash on. For a moment, the cave lit up, and they saw this goblin-like creature clinging to a rock. The boys immediately turned around and ran out of the cave as fast as they could. And finally, at our number 1 spot, we have the Spectre of Newby Church. This is a pretty famous image, said to be one of the most convincing ghostly photographs ever taken. This photo was snapped in 1963 by Reverend Kenneth F. Lord, great name, in the Church of Christ the Consoler, located on the grounds of Newby Hall in North Yorkshire, UK. The Reverend had been snapping pics of the church, and when the photos were developed, he noticed this mysterious, semi-translucent, cloaked figure standing at the church altar. He'd been completely alone in the church at the time. At least that's what he thought. First glance, it looks a bit like a plague doctor to me, almost. Skeptics took one look at this picture though and immediately called it a hoax, saying that the image was most likely the result of double exposure. It just looked too clear. The church was also not said to be haunted either. But the Reverend was adamant that what he took was real and sent the picture to experts to be examined, and it was determined at the time that the photo hadn't been tampered with at all. According to them, what was captured here was genuine. Whether it's an actual ghost or not, however, is still up in the air. This is also one that's really tall too. It's determined that whatever that thing was about 9 feet tall, so that is a very tall ghost. No thank you.